Okay, the American robot says
Yeah.
I love the option, leave the conference.
Don't do that. Don't do that. I need you here. So I'll give you a few minutes just to talk about these, and then we'll kind of think about the vocab exercise a bit more from a teaching point of view. Okay?
Mm-hmm.
Hey, welcome back. So, due to popular request, which basically means because Oksana told me to do this, which is the same as due to popular request, really. I think what I'm going to ask you to do
If everybody is happy.
just say yes to the boss. That's the way I do things.
Okay.
So what I'd like you to do, I think, is have a look at that next vocab exercise, okay, the statistics exercise, and imagine that you're doing this exercise in class with students, okay, advanced level students. I'm going to give you a few minutes just to think about how would you do it? What would you do? What would you say? What questions would you ask? How would you check the answers? Would you give any extra examples of anything? Would you kind of leave any space for the students to add their own ideas in any way? What would be your approach as a teacher? Okay. And then we'll do a compare and contrast activity. And I'll go through it as I would if I was teaching it myself. I'm slightly annoyed that Oksana's picked one of the driest, dullest, most boring bits of vocabulary in the entire.
It wasn't accidentally, because I thought.
So, you know, it's kind of an exercise in how you can do something a bit more interesting with something basically quite dry and quite dull. So I'll give you 5-6 minutes to talk through how you would approach it with your students, what you'd do, what you'd say, what examples you'd give, what questions you'd ask, and then we'll run through it, okay? Teachers' hats on now. Hey. Oh, sorry, 1 second. Let me just close this window. Sorry. Hey, so welcome back. It's always really interesting for me kind of watching teachers think through and talk through how they would approach things, because you often hear people talk about, course books, they force all teachers to teach in the same way. And then actually, when you listen to teachers talking about what they do with an exercise, it's like, 8 different teachers, 12 different ideas on what to do with the exercise and how you're going to approach it. And some of those ideas, I think, go further than others, okay? I think with all of these things, it's always thinking about what are my options, what are my alternatives, what happens if I do that, what happens if I don't do that, and what happens if I do this instead. And I was also interested just kind of watching how difficult many of you make your lives. And I'm not sure what this says about you, and kind of how difficult you make things for students as well. So I guess in a minute, I'll kind of just go through what I usually do when I'm doing this exercise. But I guess a few things to say about it first is, personally, I wouldn't bother doing any kind of warm up to it, because the speaking that you've just done in exercise 1 is the warmer. Okay. Mm-hmm. So I guess all I would do is to say, right, okay, now we're going to look at some vocabulary for talking about statistics better. Okay, straight in, bang. I think also quite a few of you were tempted to do something with the box. Okay, some of you were talking about removing the box and kind of retyping the entire exercise and giving it to the students without the words in the box. If you want to use up all your free time and give yourself something to do at the weekend when you could be doing something more fun, that's one way you could do it. Okay, my own feeling would be, don't make more work for yourself, because life is hard enough already. Okay, I think also, I mean, it was interesting, Oksana was saying she tried to do the exercise herself first without looking at the box, and she only got 4 of those right. Okay, or she guessed 4 of them. Huh?
It was a secret.
I'm sorry to reveal your secret.
Okay.
Loser. I mean, that's because it's really difficult to do without the actual words, okay? Which is why we've included the words. And, you might be able to get students to guess some of the words. The problem you're then going to have is they'll guess other words as well, okay? And you then get dragged into spending time on explaining why the word they thought of doesn't work here and how to actually use the word that they thought of in another way, all of which takes time away from just doing the exercise itself. The other thing that I heard some of you going for was kind of pre-teaching or pre-explaining the vocab in the box, okay? Again, you could do. Okay, I've done this myself when I was a younger teacher. I would say the reason not to do it is because any vocabulary exercise is basically a test, okay? And if you go through everything first and check the meaning of everything first, you've kind of done the exercise for them, okay? And if you then say, now try and fill in the gaps, the students are like, okay, right, I got everything correct, teacher. And in a way, you don't want everyone to get everything right, okay? That's not the point of doing the exercise. But the point is, by imagining it as a test, you find out who knows what, how much the group knows, what the problem areas are, which areas you might need to spend a bit more time on, and which areas you might want to spend a bit less time on. And for me, the real teaching happens when I'm checking the answers, okay? And I think in the last room I popped in, where you guys kind of went, we finished. And I was like, well, you're not doing enough, okay? If you finish that quickly, what is it you're doing when you're going through the answers? And for me, the real art of doing an exercise is what you're doing as you're checking the answers. And when I was a younger teacher, I was really shit at this, okay? I basically used to kind of go, number one, good, belief. Number two, no, wrong. It should be research. Number three, and I would just write the answers up on the board, maybe drill 1 or 2 words, and that was it. I'd kind of move on. Now, for me, when I'm looking at this, I'm kind of thinking it will probably take them maybe 9 minutes to try the exercise. By the time they compare their ideas in pairs, definitely 9 minutes. And it will probably take me at least another 10 minutes to check the answers. Okay. So for me, the kind of answer checking part is where I'm really going into the language and working it and exploring it. And that's what we're going to look at now. Okay. So what I would basically do is to say, so we're going to look at some vocabulary for talking better about statistics. Have a look at the exercise here, okay? You've got 9 sentences there. You've got 9 words in the box. Take your time. Try to complete the sentences using the words in the box. Go. I'll come round and help you, okay? And if I'm in a physical classroom, obviously I'm kind of going round, I'm asking things. If I'm in a virtual classroom, I'd probably put you in pairs and get you to try it together and still go round and check and help out and see how you're getting on. Once I think most of the group, not all of the group, most of the group has finished, I'll then say, okay, stop there. Don't worry if you haven't finished. Let's have a look at the answers and see how you've got on. And then as I'm going through, I'm kind of working with things. So I'll be kind of saying like, right, so number 1, contrary to popular belief. Good. Okay. So, you know, lots of people believe, but it's not true. So, contrary to popular belief, crime isn't getting worse. Actually, the latest statistics show crime has been going down. It's been falling. Some newspapers like to make it look like the world's becoming more violent because, you know, fear sells newspapers, but it's not true. In the same way, okay, here in the UK, lots of people believe, oh, we are leading the world in terms of our vaccinations. It's not actually true. Contrary to popular belief, vaccination rates here are no longer the highest in Europe by quite some distance. One more example. I don't know how many of you are Beatles fans, but, you know, I grew up in the 70s, so the Beatles are kind of in my blood. I saw Paul McCartney in the press this week saying that contrary to popular belief, it was actually John Lennon who broke up the Beatles, not him. John was the bad guy. Paul was the good guy. I might then ask, anything else you can think of that's contrary to popular belief? For example?
We should make an example, right?
Yeah.
If you can.
So contrary popular belief, it isn't that cold in Siberia as people think.
Yeah. You know, contrary to popular belief, there aren't polar bears wandering the Siberian city streets. And contrary to popular belief, not every Russian drinks vodka every day. Yeah. It's a good example. And I might then say, yeah, so you've got this idea of things falling. So, for example, at the moment in the UK, gas prices are going up. And one of the reasons for this is because gas production in Europe as a whole, obviously not in Russia, but in Europe as a whole has been falling for decades. And this has contributed to the current shortages. Anything else you can think of that's falling at the moment?
The ruble.
Yeah, you know, I think the ruble's basically collapsing. And also
every other week.
So again, you know, maybe the ruble has been falling for the last few years now. The pound has been falling since we left the European Union. Okay, and number 2, the
research.
The research they carried out. Yeah, so you carry out research. it's fundamentally flawed. So there are kind of clear and obvious problems or mistakes in the way that they carried out the research. Anything else that could be flawed or fundamentally flawed apart from research?
Can a person's character be flawed, not fundamental?
Yeah, you can be a deeply flawed person. Yeah. So let me just make a note of that.
Can a policy be flawed?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So you can be a deeply flawed person. You can have a flawed policy. You know, the government's handling of the pandemic or the government's approach to the pandemic can be fundamentally flawed. Can also have an argument that's flawed. You know, so that whole argument is so flawed. You know, it's full of mistakes. It's easy to criticize. Tell me again, Christina.
Election results.
I think they're more just rigged or falsified, basically. Yeah, I think, you know, the system, the process by which they gather the results can be flawed, but the results are basically rigged or falsified. I'll just make a note of it and we'll come back to it.
If an argument is flawed, it just means that, like what? It's just wrong. It's just, there is nothing.
There's a problem with the way that you've constructed the argument, or there's a kind of mistake in your thinking in the way that you've constructed the argument. So, you know, like Inessa at the moment's doing her PhD, right? And, you know, she puts forward her thesis and maybe the professors say, interesting. However, there's one fatal flaw with your argument. You assume blah, 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 blah. This isn't true. Okay?
So it's not the argument between a husband and wife, right?
No, it's a kind of academic argument. Yeah, no, sorry, I should have clarified that. Yeah. And it can also be like a fatal flaw. So, you know, the story of like Achilles, you know, with the Achilles heel, you know, this was his fatal flaw. He had one little problem or one little mistake that led to his death. Okay. And also it talks about the sample group wasn't chosen at random. It wasn't kind of, okay, so you, and you. It was self-selected. Yeah. So, you know, it's often a problem when you've got like opinion polls that they don't just ask random people in the street. It's people who self-select. Oh, I'm going to answer this online questionnaire. And often, if you're self-selected, you do this because you have your own agenda. You have your own kind of personal reason for wanting to give your opinion. So you've got your own to grind. You've got your own personal point you want to make. You've got your own to grind.
To grind, like in this way.
Yeah.
It's like, this is grinding.
Yeah.
Yeah,
You've got your own axe to grind.
Okay.
Yeah, you've got your own axe to grind. I've got a note of all of this stuff, so don't panic. I prepared one earlier. Okay, you've got your own agenda. You've got your own axe to grind. And number three, tell me, Sultana.
Not like ex-boyfriend, ex like where's the ex?
Like Game of Thrones.
This one. Okay.
AXE.
AXE. Yeah. So, you know, usually the people that choose to answer those questions, they do it because they've got their own agenda. They've got their own axe to grind. Yeah. And yeah, there's a number of variables weren't covered by the data. Yeah. So, you know, statistics which can vary. It's one of the reasons proving theories about language teaching is so difficult. You know, when people say to me, like, can you prove the lexical approach is effective? So you can't really prove any method is effective in language teaching because there's too many variables. It's like, how old are the students? How much exposure have the students had to English? Do they use English outside of the class? there are a lot of different variables that affect the results. So the data didn't cover these variables, so it was hard to establish a, how do you pronounce that word? Establish a
Causal.
causal, not casual,
Causal.
be careful.
Causal.
A causal. Hard to establish a causal
Link.
link
Link, a
Yeah.
causal link.
between gaming and bad behavior. So if you establish a causal link, you prove that one thing causes another thing. Yeah. Anything you can think of that there's a causal link between, or they've established a causal link between. So, for example, in the 50s, they established a causal link between smoking and lung cancer.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the tobacco companies tried to sort of cover this up for a long time, but they proved, if you smoke, it can cause lung cancer. Any other causal results?
Like causal link between vaccination and the decrease in
Yeah.
COVID cases.
Yeah, I was talking about this in one of the rooms. I saw the data this morning for highest infection rates in Europe, and the two highest countries by a mile are Romania and Bulgaria. And guess which countries have the lowest rates of vaccination? Romania and Bulgaria. So, there's a clear causal link between the level of infection rates and, the kind of number of people who've been vaccinated, or the lack of vaccinations. Yeah. You can also have causal relationships. So, some people believe there's a causal relationship between like violence in movies and violent behavior. Yeah. Anything else you can have that's causal apart from relationships and links?
Eating sausages and the level of cancer.
I think eating processed meat generally.
Mhm.
Yeah. There does now seem to be a causal link between eating processed meat and certain kinds of cancer. Yeah. Okay. And number 4, there's conflicting
Evidence.
evidence. Yeah.
Mhm.
Some data shows there's a correlation, some data doesn't. There's no general consensus. There's no general agreement. So you can have conflicting evidence. Anything else that can be conflicting?
Can it be
Information.
Conflicting information,
Data? No.
conflicting data, conflicting advice.
Mm.
Like when your
Argument.
kids are ill and you go on the internet and it's like 5-year-old cough, advice, and you get 10 different pieces of advice and you're like, I don't know what I should do. There's too much conflicting advice.
Like growing kids up.
Bringing kids up. Yeah.
Bringing kids up, yeah.
But there's a lot of conflicting advice on how best to bring up kids.
How to breastfeed and stuff.
Yeah. I guess you can also have like conflicting interests. So, for all of you with kids, the kind of conflicting interests of managing a career and kind of raising kids or bringing up a family. They don't always operate together. Sometimes those interests conflict.
You can take
Okay. Yeah, tell me.
statements. Yeah, give conflicting statements to
To the police, maybe, yeah?
police, for example. Yeah,
Yeah.
probably in court when you are a witness.
Yeah. People give conflicting statements. If you're kind of listening to the evidence, you have to deal with conflicting evidence, deal with conflicting statements. Yeah, absolutely. And number 5, the data showed a negative
Correlation. Yeah.
between income and birth rate. This is a bit like Tatiana was saying earlier. She read somewhere recently that there's a negative correlation between the amount of money that a man spends on an engagement ring and the length of the marriage. The bigger the ring, the shorter the marriage. I'm
Why
sorry to
isn't-
those of you that have huge, great big engagement rings or wedding
And the
rings.
faces of all the girls like,
Yeah, I just went for like a £50 cheap silver ring. Is why I've been married 25 years. It's
So it works.
so there must be some truth in this, son. You know, I'm proof of
grain
this
of
theory.
truth.
Any other negative correlations you can think of?
Between divorce rate and like living with in-laws or something like that. I guess.
Uh-oh.
You mean like there's a negative correlation between the length of time you live with your in-laws and the length of your marriage?
Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, and there's maybe a causal link between living with your in-laws and getting divorced.
I'm
Yeah,
living at my husband's parents' house now.
you are.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
How long have you been married
already.
so far, Jen?
Tomorrow will be 14 years.
14. And how long have you been living at your in-laws?
For now, it's 1 year.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Yeah.
Yeah. I guess there's also there's like negative correlations with students. So it's things like, there's a negative correlation between absences and grades. Like the more classes you miss, the worse your grades are likely to be. As one goes up, the other one goes down. Yeah.
Negative correlation between homework done or done homework and exam results.
Between homework done and exam results. Yeah. Like, yeah.
And can be negative correlation between.
Oh, wait a minute. Is that a negative correlation or a causal link?
It's a causal link.
It's a causal link. I think because the more homework you do, the better your grades. If one goes up, the other one goes up. Negative correlation is like one goes up and one goes down.
So will it be then negative correlation between car accidents and the usage of mobile phone?
No.
Again,
This is
Causal
again
link
a
again.
causal link.
Okay.
No, there's a causal link.
Okay.
Okay.
One.
Yeah. So it's like one has to
Can
go
I-
up at the same time as the other one goes down.
It's like negative
something
correlation.
like
Go on, Tatiana.
The more
negative
we
correlation
study,
between teach.
Go
can
on.
I?
Tatiana 1 and then Tatiana 2.
The more we
Go
study,
ahead.
the more we discover how ignorant we are. No, how
The more you learn, the less you know.
yes. this
Okay,
is-
so there's a negative correlation between studying and certainty.
Mhm.
Okay, it's like the more you do one, the less the other one exists.
Yes.
Yeah. And other Tatiana?
Okay, a negative correlation between the pay rise and the quality of work. I mean, like,
Don't tell your
in-
boss this.
sorry?
Don't tell your boss this.
I am the
Well, like
boss.
the more they pay you, the worse you work.
Yeah. So
No.
as
What kind of teacher thinks this?
I mean,
No,
yeah,
it's about Russian footballers only.
yeah. Yeah. They
So,
become
I mean-
just spoiled. Yeah.
Often with footballers, there's a definite negative correlation between the amount they
Yeah.
earn and their performance. This is true.
Okay. Yeah. Mhm.
Teachers, no. There's a causal link between pay and poor performance. The worse they pay you, the worse.
I'm afraid it doesn't always work like this. Yeah.
I guess this depends how cynical you are.
I am the boss in my company. I know.
Oh yeah.
Believe me.
So it's a pay cut for you next year, Tatiana. Pay yourself less. And Oksana, sorry, you were going to say.
I forgot. I mean,
Ah.
it was such a long time ago.
Go on, and we'll do one more. So the research didn't come up with the right result. So the company twisted the figures to suit its own
And
ends. Yeah. They had some kind of goal that they wanted. And so they kind of twisted the figures. With the same meaning, you can also talk about the figures.
To make
No.
manipulate.
You can massage the figures.
Oh, gosh.
Massage.
Yeah. Massage the figures.
Wow.
Yeah. So companies might massage the figures to suit their own ends. So basically, the way I would deal with these kinds of things is like this. Okay, 1 minute, I've frozen. Yeah, so basically the way I deal with these kinds of things is very much like this. Like, I take much more time kind of going through the answers, exploring meanings, asking these kinds of questions, leaving it open for students to give their own examples, checking, no, you've misunderstood it. That's a causal link. That's not a negative correlation. You get funny examples come up from students about, there's a causal link between living with your in-laws and getting divorced. I'm living with my in-laws at the moment. Good luck. You get all of that kind of comedy that kind of emerges, even though basically you're talking about a very dry, very boring subject. And from that, there will be loads of new language that came up, which I will show you and send you later. Before, let's just see, did anyone have any questions about any of that or anything you wanted to ask? So yeah, when I said to you guys, you finished quickly, you want more.
Of course.
So
Well,
the more language we have, the more we have to practice it. I mean, my students will ask how they can remember it all, how they can practice it all. They can't. They
won't remember
every
it
item.
all.
Yeah, right.
They won't
absolutely.
remember it all.
Yeah.
Just
accept it
periodically.
Say again.
Revising periodically. Revision really works.
Basically, you revise, and that needs to be something both that the teacher does in class and that the students do themselves at home. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
And, not everyone will remember everything. And particularly at this level, not everyone will use everything. Okay. I mean, there's a lot of vocab there that I don't really use much in my daily life. But if I hear it used or if I read it being used, obviously I understand it and I process it. But, I don't often have detailed conversations about statistics. What I was thinking of is kind of, some of the examples I've written. I'll send this over later.
Okay.
So, things like that whole argument is deeply flawed. He's a deeply flawed person. The government's whole approach to the pandemic's fundamentally flawed. There's too many variables. Those kinds of things are things that I might say, okay? And, I honestly don't know what to do about it. I've been getting such conflicting advice, yeah? Also with things like you're twisting my words. So you can twist figures, you can also twist someone's words, yeah? So it's kind of a mixture of thinking about things I would say myself, using some of that language, and also thinking about things that you might hear said or things that you might see written. And usually, I mean, some of this I would cheat and prepare before. Some of this I would be writing during the class. I wouldn't write everything every lesson. This is a kind of, I've given you everything to show you some of the possible ways that I might do things. To be honest, in a real class with a whiteboard and stuff, I might write 3 or 4 of these things up while you guys are doing the exercise based on things that I've seen you having problems with. But before the lesson, I'm looking at this exercise and I'm thinking about these kinds of examples. And I looked some of these things up in dictionaries. So I looked up conflicting, I looked up causal, I looked up flaw, okay? And, I just look them up in 2 or 3 different dictionaries and I think of good examples. And sometimes I make examples that I'm going to use in class. So, I mean, that was taken directly from a dictionary. I then added that. This was taken from a dictionary. I added this. Okay? So, this is for me, rather than spend time working out extra activities or spend time rewriting it and removing the words, I would rather spend 10, 15 minutes just looking at the language, thinking about the questions I'm going to ask, thinking about the examples I'm going to come up with and what I'm going to do with the language, and leave that space and that time for the students to kind of ask questions, interact. And, students at this level will always have questions. Can I say a person is flawed? Can I say the election results were flawed? It's like, whoa. And as a teacher, those are the interesting questions because they force me to think a bit more about the language. Sometimes I'm not sure. Sometimes I have to go home and check. Whew. So yeah, as you can see, that there's loads of extra stuff there that I've been writing down earlier. I'll send those over, and you know, if and when you ever teach this page yourself, feel free to steal some of those activities.
Thank you.
You're welcome. You're welcome. It was interesting doing something different with you. Maybe we should do another one in a couple of weeks.
Yes.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna send this over. Oksana, I'm gonna send it later because I've got to go down and sort out some stuff now.
No
Yeah.
problem.
But it'll be with you later on tonight. Don't panic. Yeah. All right. Lovely to see you all, and take care.
Thank
Have
you.
a great week.
Thank you.
Okay, thank
Enjoy
you.
your
Have a
teaching
nice
and
week.
enjoy the snow.
Yeah, okay.
Have
Enjoy
a
the
nice day.
weekend.
Bye.
17 degrees in London.
17.
17 degrees.
Disgusting weather, disgusting.
Impressed guys also.
Yeah. Take it easy. Yeah.
Yeah,
Have a great
goodbye.
week.